Okay, want me to walk up and walk off like, hey, I'm Carlos Lago. This is the 2022 Honda Civic Si. Welcome to Car and Driver.
Yeah, let's practice and make this move.
There aren't very many cars like the Civic Si anymore, where other sport compacts like the Volkswagen Golf GTI, Hyundai Veloster N, and Subaru WRX, they've all creeped up in terms of price and performance, but the Si maintains more of a value-oriented proposition. For example, this HPT version costs just over $28,000, including destination, and the only options that really affect price are your choice of exterior color. Now, not only is the Civic Si generally less expensive, it's also the only version or the only sport compact out there that only comes with a 6-speed manual transmission, and that's an admirable trait. Actually, scratch that. I think it's pretty remarkable that you can get a sport compact car, a sedan, for less than 30 grand with just a manual transmission. The fact that this exists at all is impressive. Like the standard 2022 Honda Civic, this Si is the first outing of the new generation of Civic. You can tell by the fact that it looks much cleaner and more sophisticated than last year's car, but that new, smarter looking bodywork also hides small increases in overall size. Now, like last year, the engine is a small but turbocharged 1.5 liter with 200 horsepower. That's 5 fewer horsepower than you would get last year, and that's the result of Honda massaging the power band so that peak torque arrives earlier for this engine. You also get a limited slip differential and 18-inch wheels, which brings us to the tires. That's the only difference between the two Si trim levels. The base one has all seasons, and this HPT comes with summer tire. And that brings me to just admiring how good this wheel and tire package looks, even when it's covered with crusty Michigan road salt. It's delicious. Now you may be thinking, this new Si is more expensive than the last generation, it's bigger, and it has less power? And you'd be right, but the differences are minor. For example, take the curb weight. This thing still weighs less than 3,000 pounds on our scales, and in 2022, where 7,000 plus pound EV trucks are becoming a reality, that's an impressive feat. What about the rest? We tested this car in West Coast and on the summer tires. Its acceleration results were slightly worse than the last Si by about 0.2 of a second to 60 and the quarter mile. In our rolling start 5 to 60 acceleration test, this was as quick as the last gen Si, so that means it doesn't feel any slower in the real world. Now, we don't have adaptive dampers, but as for handling grip, this thing generated 0.94 G average around our skid pad, and it stopped from 70 in 160 feet, and that's also basically the same as the last gen Si. So the test results are a bit of a mix, and that's why in cases like this, measuring the Si solely based off those results, I believe, misses the point. If you look at the Si more as a nice car to drive rather than outright performance, that's where it really begins to make sense. It's about the things that you interact with when you're operating a machine, sort of the tactile feedback that makes driving pleasurable. At least that's what I enjoy about the Si. The number one contributor to that is the shifter. It just feels really nice. Somebody at Honda clearly wanted to make sure that this shifter had the satisfying weight and clear defined throws when you change gears, and that really shows every time you put your hand on this shifter. It's designed in a way that feels good in your hand, and when you move it through, the weighting and gearing is just right, or at least the feel of it going through each gear is just right. And that's something that you can't put a number against, but it does affect the way you drive more than a 0 to 60 time. You get automatic rev matching that you can turn off if you want, but around town I've left it on because it takes the work for me out of having to heel toe downshift, which I don't really want to try to do when I'm just commuting. If you want to do that though, you can turn it off and that works fine. The steering and handling are also sporty too. Now, we don't get adaptive dampers and the ride quality is slightly more firm as a result in order to get the handling to feel right. But to me, that's what makes this feel sporty. The steering is nicely weighted and precise in a way that just feels more satisfying than your typical family sedan. Now, the engine isn't making a terrific amount of power, and it still has that annoying quirk from the previous generation where during a wide open throttle, high engine speed gear change, the engine revs flare up while you're shifting. That's annoying. But the way they've massaged the power band to give you a bit more power down low and low RPMs makes this engine feel totally fine to drive around town. It's not the high point of the car, that's definitely the shifter, but it's not doing anything overtly bad either. Overall, when you look at this car from the perspective of just pure satisfaction, pure just interacting with a machine, that's what, to me, makes this more satisfying to drive than some other options out there. And that's why it's so much fun. That's what makes it so pleasurable. This is relatively an inexpensive family sedan that you can just enjoy driving every day to work with your friends, your family, or whatever, and that's why the SI works. It's not made for everybody. The fact that it's manual only guarantees that. But for those who enjoy what this car delivers, you're gonna really enjoy this thing. Another reason why the SI shines is of what's going on in here. This is a spacious, attractive, and highly usable interior. Like the exterior, the interior, the materials just look nicer. Everything just feels a bit more sophisticated than the previous generation. In terms of features, you have quite a bit to go over, like a large and easy to use center infotainment display with the phone integration you'd expect. I've got Apple CarPlay up here. You've got an upgraded audio system and blind spot monitoring as well. The front seats are pretty spacious and the back seats are pretty usable too. Alex, how you doing in there?
Not great, not terrible.
So Alex is, how tall are you?
I am 6'4", so sitting upright, I have to duck my head, so I gotta lean back a little bit so a little more comfortable. But the headroom's a little tight for me, so if you're over 6 foot, you might have a little trouble.
Yeah. But you're sitting behind my seating position.
That's true. You're a little bit shorter than me, so it does help. That's generally what I have to do when I have to sit in the back seat, sit behind someone who's got shorter legs.
Give it a score out of 10.
For a long distance ride, I would give it a 4. Short distance to the store and back, I would give it an 8.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you. On the downside, you don't get adaptive dampers like you did with the previous SI, and nor do you get heated seats, which, given the weather right now, I'd really appreciate. If you want something more serious, wait for a Type R to fill the void. We can't wait to see what that thing looks like. And even though the Civic Si isn't the flashiest or mightiest sport compact available, it remains an enjoyable driver's car that most folks can afford. And that's why it's one of our Editor's Choice winners for Sport Compact Car.